Hey folks, today I'm going to show you something I've been asked about thousands of times. As you all know, I am the Alabama hot sauce guy. I live in Florence, Alabama. I'm proud of Alabama. But I was born and raised in Eastern North Carolina, which I think is the home of whole-hog barbecue. So today I'm going to give you a little history of barbecue in the Carolinas with an emphasis on the kinds of sauce they use. So join me and I'll be right back. Hey folks, this is still from Alabama Hot Sauce. That's alabamahotsauce.com on the web. Today we're going to have some fun. Even though I am the Alabama hot sauce guy, I live in Florence, Alabama, and I'm proud of my product line. My heritage through my childhood and most of my adult years was Eastern North Carolina, which I think is the whole-hog barbecue capital of the world. Now, I was raised in a barbecue family. My parents' friends were barbecue entrepreneurs. I've watched many whole-hog barbecues, and I think I have a pretty good grasp on how the famous Eastern North Carolina Mop Sauce was made. Now, in addition, I'm going to try to tell you a little bit about why it would have been made that way and what was happening in the early 1900s when whole-hog barbecue stormed the country. At the end of the Civil War, barbecue stands popped up on front yards, at farms, on street corners, because millions of the best barbecue cooks in the world were free men earning their own living. And boy, could they cook. Now, barbecue stands at that time each had their own unique little twist, and they each had their own very dedicated group of customers. Like I said, they set up wherever they could, front yards, gravel roads, but all their customers knew where they would be, and they knew their hours. These folks would begin late at night, oftentimes midnight. They'd put a whole hog on a concrete block pit they made, usually cooked on oak or hickory wood, and that barbecue would cook for 10 or 12 hours. Then their customers would begin lining up. They would shovel the barbecue onto their plates or into paper bags or onto bread, right out of the carcass of the cooked pig, and everybody had a wonderful time. And this went on day after day after day in hundreds of places all over the South. My hometown of Rocky Mount, North Carolina, is located on the Little Tar River. It's in the very eastern part of the state. In the early 1900s, it was exceptionally rural. Other than small stores and maybe one or two large sellers like Sears, there was really nothing there. There were restaurants, and some people did eat out. But in 1925, a local Rocky Mount resident by the name of Bob Melton opened the very first sit-down whole-hog barbecue restaurant in the state. As a matter of fact, he claimed that it was the first whole-hog barbecue restaurant in the country. And Bob Melton located in a building right on the Tar River that had everything he needed. It was big enough for a dining room. It had space out back to build his pig cooking lean-tos. And it had a fresh water well, an artesian well we call it in the East. And that was everything Bob Melton needed to make his barbecue. So he opened up his business selling chopped pork barbecue, Brunswick stew, and slaw. Now, each night his wife would bake some sorts of desserts: apple pie, apple pudding, cherry pie, banana pudding, and she'd bring them to the restaurant each morning, and that would be the desserts that Bob Melton would serve. And his restaurant went on to continue selling barbecue right up until 1999, when his building was destroyed by a terrible hurricane and flood that hit Rocky Mountain. Now, what I want to do today is I want to talk about the mop sauce that everybody hears so much about, that is talked about widely when it comes to cooking whole hog barbecue. Now, I've got over here beside me what the French would call the mise en place. All my ingredients I'm going to use set aside, and every one of these things are still in the original container they came in from the factory. I've got my Viking commercial induction plate here, and I got a pot, and I'm going to show you how to make Eastern North Carolina whole hog mop sauce. Let's talk a little bit about ingredients. The primary ingredient in this sauce is vinegar. This is apple cider vinegar. More than likely, in the 1800s and early 1900s, this cider vinegar may well have been made at home. It's also possible it was bought at country stores. That's very, very likely. And it was probably packaged in 1 gallon and 5 gallon jugs because it was used extensively for many other things, because food preservation without refrigeration was essential. So it would have started with apple cider vinegar. Now, the next thing that would have gone into the mop sauce is red pepper flakes. Now, red pepper flakes probably were grown on local farms. They more than likely were bird peppers because they were very common in Eastern North Carolina. They could have been cayenne peppers, which was a cash crop in Eastern North Carolina in the early 1900s. So, red pepper. They also had a little bit of salt. Now, I've ground up some salt pretty coarse here. This is kosher salt, and I've ground it up to use in this recipe. And some might have used a sweetener. If they used a sweetener, in all likelihood, that sweetener would have been molasses. I know for a fact that Mr. Bob Melton did not use sweetener in his barbecue sauce. He used these 3 simple ingredients. Prior to the opening of Bob Melton's restaurant and after the opening of Bob Melton's restaurant, when a whole hog was barbecued on an outdoor pit, they used tens and tens of gallons of their mop sauce. They cooked it in big pots, oftentimes cast iron pots. They used a regular cotton mop, and they dipped it down in the mop sauce, and they spread it on the whole hog pig. I'll try to find a black and white picture of them actually cooking whole hogs at Bob Melton's barbecue. These folks, unlike formal chefs, didn't do much measuring. My guess is that they sent out to the store or went up to their storehouse or their root cellar, wherever, and they got as many gallons of vinegar as they thought they needed. They got as many containers of pepper as they thought they needed. They got as many containers of salt as they thought they needed, and they poured it all in. So I've got in front of me here a pot sitting on my Viking commercial oven. So what I'm going to do is, just like they did, I'm going to pour in a considerable quantity of vinegar until it looks right. While this sauce does not need to be warmed, it was warmed oftentimes when they cooked whole hogs from the end of the Civil War up until the 50s. Now, many people claim the reason they warmed it is because they also used butter in this sauce. There's no evidence, in my opinion, that butter would have been used in this sauce early on in the 1900s. The reason being, it would make no sense to add an additional fat to a relatively fatty food like a whole hog. So I don't think that butter was used. I don't remember in the 50s and 60s going to Bob Melton there being butter in the sauce, and I don't see any evidence and all the reading I've done that he put in butter. The next thing they would do is they would take red pepper. Now, just like they did the vinegar, there wasn't much measuring going on. They would just drop in an amount of red pepper that they thought made sense. Okay? So I put a good deal of red pepper in there. And they'd have done the same thing with salt. They wouldn't have measured. They'd have just put some salt in it. Whatever they said makes sense. And then they would begin to mix. What you have here is nothing more than vinegar, red pepper, and salt. And this was the classic mop sauce that was used most of the time in roadside stands and in the sit-down restaurant at Bob Melton's and in the restaurants that exploded in Eastern North Carolina after the opening of Bob Melton's. Within 10 years, my little hometown of Rocky Mount, with 35,000 people, had nearly 11 sit-down barbecue restaurants, all with their own unique style, all with their own unique side items. So these guys would have probably used a boat paddle. They'd have been out in the lean-to. The pigs would have been cooking. By the way, the whole hog is put on the fire with the skin side up, the meat side down, and you've all seen the pictures of the hog splayed out. And while that hog was cooking from that side, probably 4 hours, they would start mixing up and getting their mop sauce ready. The moment the hog was turned over, exposing the meat side, they'd begin a constant process of mopping that pig. And like I say, a single pig might get 10 gallons of sauce mopped on it. Pictures where you see them cooking 10 or 12 hogs, a person would have been busy all day long keeping mop sauce mixed, because it could have been potentially 100 gallons of it used. This simple sauce, salt, red pepper, and vinegar, not only makes sense because of the historical record and what I can remember, but it makes sense from an economic point of view. The business of cooking whole hogs was really a thing done on a budget. Whether it was in Mr. Melton's restaurant or whether it was a roadside stand, the hog was bought from a local farmer, dressed and killed, or the person cooking the barbecue made it themselves. It was a very low-cost item, and they would have made the sauce equally low cost. They would not have added any ingredients that they didn't need to help tenderize that barbecue and to give it that nice acid bite that whole-hog barbecue is famous for. So, there we go. Let me show you a little bit of this stuff. That is the traditional mop sauce that would have gone on Eastern Carolina whole-hog barbecue. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip out a little bit of this and save it in my jar. There we go. At the roadside barbecue stands, I think I told you earlier, each of the cookers were famous for their own particular kind of side items. Some of them would be a side of cabbage slaw. Some might be a side of some sort of stew. Barbecued potatoes were very, very popular then. Potatoes cooked in water and lots of red pepper. So that would have been fairly common then. In Mr. Melton's restaurant, his side items were slaw, Brunswick stew, barbecued potatoes, and whatever desserts his wife cooked at night. Later on, they began cooking desserts at their restaurant, and they became very famous for Southern-style banana pudding. But people also frequently asked Mr. Melton for a side of the barbecue sauce. So oftentimes, they would put on the table a bowl of this mop sauce, okay? Many people like really, really hot stuff. And pepper flakes, while there's a lot of them, don't give you a lot of heat. So, Mr. Melton decided to use another North Carolina product to sort of jazz up the sauce that he sat out on the table. He did not mark the pigs with this jazzed up sauce. This is a sauce that they only put out on the family-style dinner tables when people came in to eat. Now, you all know I'm the owner of Alabama hot sauce. And I have what I think some of the best hot sauces made. But for this recipe I'm going to show you, I'm going to use Texas Pete. And there's a reason I'm going to do that. Texas Pete is the state barbecue sauce, or hot sauce, of North Carolina. It was made right in Salisbury, Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Every table had it. As soon as it became popular in the early 1920s, this stuff was just everywhere. So people were crazy about Texas Pete. I don't think there would have been any other hot sauce purchased in a store there. I think everybody would have carried Texas Pete. So I am using Texas Pete. Even though I'd rather use Alabama hot sauce, I think it'd make it better. And I'm using Texas Pete in an attempt to stay authentic to this recipe. Now, all Mr. Melton would do is take Texas Pete and take some of this stuff in his back kitchen, and he would pour in the hot sauce. So I just poured a whole bottle of this hot sauce I've got here. We mix it all up. It starts to take on a much, much redder color. And this was the table sauce that Bob Melton served. Other barbecue restaurants had varying degrees of table sauces. But the widespread table sauce in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and 50s in sit-down barbecue restaurants in the eastern part of the state was the traditional mop sauce with the addition of Texas Pete. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to dish out a little bowl of this. And when I set them side by side, you're going to be able to see clearly the difference in these two sauces. Now, let's put a cap on that one. We'll shake it up a little bit. Now, that's become to look a little more like a traditional hot sauce. It is not a mop sauce. This is the mop sauce. This is the sauce that would have gone on at the table for those who wanted a little more tang, a little more heat. Now, while barbecue-only restaurants were opening up in Eastern North Carolina, the places in the more developed part, in the central part of the state of North Carolina, between Raleigh and Winston-Salem, were having customers come in and ask for pork barbecue. So they began adding pork barbecue at the demand of their customers to their menu. Now, these restaurants were far more developed than the original restaurants in Eastern North Carolina. So they already had ovens and stoves and places where they cooked all the rest of the fare they served on their menu. And to be honest, most of them were located in more developed areas. There was nowhere to cook a whole hog. So they began cooking not a whole hog, but using their traditional ovens to cook pork butts. And pork butt is the front part of the hog. It's very, very tasty. It's also what is used in most barbecue restaurants now across the country. Pork butts were easy to get from their suppliers. They weren't buying from farmers then. They were buying from genuine food suppliers. They fit in the ovens, and they were fairly easy to cook. And they developed their own traditional barbecue sauce, which was not glazed over the pork butt, because instead of being cooked open, it was cooked closed in an oven. So they took barbecue sauce to the table, and basically what they did is they used this same 4-piece sauce, and to that they would add ketchup. So I'm putting a pretty good amount of ketchup here. And in addition to that, it became very popular to add some sweetness, which most of the time was grandma's molasses. So I add a little molasses into this sauce. And we begin to stir. Now what we're going to have is we're going to have a little bit thicker sauce. It's going to be sweeter because of the addition of molasses. It certainly smells good. I don't think I put enough ketchup. Now, these restaurants would have probably measured. I'm an Eastern North Carolina boy, and other than when I cook in my hot sauce operation, I don't do much measuring. There we go. Now, this sauce became known, along with the pork butts, as the Lexington-Style. Restaurants in Lexington, North Carolina, in that center part of the state, were the first to add chopped barbecue and sliced barbecue on their menus. Now, I want to make a point about this sliced barbecue. There was no sliced barbecue served at Bob Melton's restaurant or any of these barbecue stands. They picked the meat out of the hog, they put it on cutting boards, and they chopped it very fine. The other unique thing about whole hog barbecue is they also chopped the pig skin in with it. So that gave it additional flavor, and it gave it an amazing texture. Now, in Lexington, where they serve both chopped and ground barbecue, they did not do any mopping of the sauce. It was put in there, they probably put salt and pepper on it, and that was about it. But they made this Lexington-style barbecue sauce, which is the same Eastern North Carolina stuff, with the addition of molasses and ketchup. And this was what they put out to their customers. Now, this sauce does need to be pretty actively blended because the ketchup is very thick and it doesn't want to homogenize with the vinegar without a lot of agitation until you add heat to it. And I'm going to draw me out a little bottle of this. And there we have the Lexington style barbecue sauce that was placed on the table. In the ensuing years, the variety of different sauces that are served with barbecue, including the variety of ways barbecue was cooked, has expanded and expanded and expanded. When you move about 50 or 60 miles away from the coast of South Carolina, on the coast of South Carolina, they use traditional mop sauce. You start to see the mustard sauce. And there, instead of adding ketchup, they would have added whole mustard. That is a very, very popular sauce. I'm not going to show you how to make it in this video. I may cover South Carolina sauces a little later, simply because I don't know much about South Carolina sauces, other than that I've read a lot and I've eaten a lot of it. So I wanted to tell you that there's all kinds of barbecue sauce. There's a Kansas City style, which is very thick and sticky, has a tremendous amount of syrup and molasses in it. There's a Texas style, which has tomato and ketchup and sugar, vinegar. There's just a ton of them. As a matter of fact, you can use your imagination, and with the ingredients you have in your kitchen right now, even if you don't have these, you can cook up the perfect mop sauce for the next pork that you cook. Now, folks, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I certainly have enjoyed it. We have made Eastern North Carolina traditional whole hog mop sauce. We've made what Bob Melton and many other restaurants served on their table side at customers' demand, which is the mop sauce with a little more heat in it. I added Texas Pete. If you're going to make it, put Alabama hot sauce in it. It's better. I want to stick to the traditional recipe. And then we have the so-called Lexington-Style sauce, which was not hot done, but just like the sauce with the Texas Pete in it. This was served at tableside. And these three things have become a tradition in North Carolina barbecue. I want to tell you a little quick personal story. My wife is from Alabama, and when we moved back here, both of us lived in Richmond, Virginia. When we moved back here, the first times we bought barbecue here locally, because I was very interested in trying, there's a lot of barbecue restaurants in Florence. We spread it out in a pan to warm it, and I got out the vinegar. She said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to make some sauce to put on this." And I made this traditional mop sauce, and I poured it all over that container of barbecue and put it in the oven and warmed it. And she said, after a lifetime of eating barbecue, it's the best tasting barbecue she's ever had. We now make it and oftentimes put it on pork tenderloin. We put it on roast because acidity makes meat taste good. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'd love to hear your comments about how you make similar sauces, about how you know your relatives might have made similar sauces. Like I say, there's 1,000 ways. And in addition to that, if you enjoyed this video, take a minute to subscribe to my channel. I have hot sauce videos and all things related to pepper and a few historical videos, which I hope to do more of these. So subscribe to that channel. While you're there, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up and ring that bell so YouTube will know to notify you each time I post a new video. Again, folks, thank you. This is Phil from Alabama Hot Sauce, and I'll see you next time. Hey, folks, this is Phil from Alabama Hot Sauce. I want to thank you for watching this video. I've made a couple of suggestions and put them up on the screen of other videos I think you will like. In addition, while you're here, punch that logo and subscribe to my channel. Share this with your friends, and once again, thank you.